Hi, I'm Neve O'Connor, and I'm here with Haley Hewitt, who's a Boston-based harpist. Let's talk about how you started with the harp. It's kind of a rare instrument. What drew you to that instrument?
Okay, well, when I was about 8 years old, I had been taking piano since I was really little, so I was, somewhat capable for an 8-year-old. And I had never seen a harp before, but we went to this little shop in Brattleboro, Vermont called the Maple Leaf Music Store, I think it was called. And in the back of the store, they had a harp. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. It was beautiful. It was statuesque and curvy and blonde and just gorgeous. And I was really drawn to the look of the thing. And so I went right up to it and started plunking away at it, not having a clue what I was supposed to do. And fortunately, it was in tune. So I was able to figure out that it's set up pretty much just like the white keys of a piano. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I started playing my piano pieces on it. And my parents came over and they were like, okay, we're going to get this for her. And so we went home with it that day. Yeah, and it's that harp right there.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's how I started.
That gave me chills.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I later found out that my mother had always wanted to play. And so when she saw that I was interested, she was like, yep, this is worth the investment if Haley really wants to do it. And so at first, for the first few years, I was kind of iffy about learning. I had other things going on. I was doing other activities. But then when I was about 12, I really got the bug and just fell in love with the instrument. And I had some fluidity on it, and I was able to just play what I wanted instead of working out so much how to do it. So that really helped, and it just became something I loved to do. So I'm still doing it.
That's amazing. So, right, you're a harpist, and then also you arrange and compose, and you also educate. Crazy talented, obviously. But
thanks.
Immediately I was like, okay, I only minimally know composing or arranging. Can you maybe, for our viewers, explain the difference between those two?
Sure. Composing basically means you start with a blank sheet of paper, or it's all yours. Everything in the composition is from within you. An arrangement is usually a setting of something that is already composed, not necessarily by you. So like a folk tune, you find it and you want to add something to it or manipulate it somehow. That would be arranging. So if, for example, I run a harp group, if I have a tune that I want the harp group to play, it's pretty unlikely that I'll find an arrangement for harp group of this tune. So I end up taking the tune and manipulating it and adding to it and bringing out what I can from it, and that would be arranging. So it's really fun. It's a great stepping stone to composing because it uses a lot of the skills that you have to develop to compose. You have to come up with your own ideas. You have to make decisions about what notes to play. But you're not completely starting from a very scary blank sheet of paper. So arranging is really great if you want to get started with composing.
Wow. So you had to learn the language of music. And you kind of talked about that before with your background in piano and being able to like put those keys on the harp and like just even at first glance, that's amazing. And so you also educate around Quincy now, which is really cool. And we were talking about this before. So what age range do you get usually? You know?
I don't like to start much earlier than 7 or 8, unless it's a pretty physically built child, because they tend to not be able to handle the weight of the thing and also the strength and dexterity that you need for your fingers. So I usually, if a very young student wants to learn harp, I tell the parents, start them on piano because it doesn't take as much to handle for a child, and they're still building the skills they'll need to learn the harp because it's very transferable, and in some ways it's easier to learn because it's easier to push a button on a piano than to figure out how to move your hands correctly with the harp. So 8 or 7, all the way up to however old you want. I think my oldest is in her 80s, and she's amazing. She's still got all her faculties, and she loves it. and she just started a couple years ago. So she's great. I have so much admiration for her.
That is so cool.
And so it's a whole range of ages. I have like a cluster of little kids, a cluster of teenagers, a cluster of middle-aged people who now have time and their kids are out and they now have money and they're like, I've always wanted to do this, so now I'm going to do it. And they're awesome. And then I have a couple of much older people.
Yeah.
So really the harp is, it's not so hard to get started on. It's a very friendly instrument. It sounds great right away. The hard part is getting really good at it. That takes a lot of practice. But getting it to sound good and so that you can be satisfied with the sound you're making, it can happen in just a couple of weeks, which is great. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, like I almost associate it with kind of like folklore and like magic and that kind of feel, because it's just such a majestic instrument.
Yeah.
And so you're also obviously a performer on top of all this. And what questions come to my mind are, how do you perform with the harp?
This kind of harp, the one that I'm going to be playing today, is called a floor standing harp. So it just sits on the floor and I lean it towards myself and I use my hands and arms and play it.
Awesome.
There are smaller harps that can sit in your lap. They're like about that big and they're too small to sit on the floor. You have to raise them up so that you can reach them. And then there are the much larger instruments called pedal harps. Those you kind of play similarly, like you sit it on the floor and you lean it back against you. But you end up using your feet for the pedals at the floor. And it's just a much more substantial instrument. So it requires a kind of more good posture, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
So those are the three main kinds of harps that you'd have to like adjust for if you're going to perform on them.
Wow, that's so cool. It's just something that I never knew about.
Yeah.
But so you are going to perform for us today. Do you want to talk a little bit about what pieces you're going to?
In harp tradition, we are very lucky to have some amazing composers. And the most famous of them is an Irishman. His name was Turlough O'Carolan, and even non-harpers know who he is. He is that famous, which is rare. Usually there's famous and there's harp famous. He's actually famous, so we're pretty lucky to have him. So he wrote tons of music for the harp. He was an itinerant harper, and he was blind. So he would go from house to house to house, composing music and performing for people. Usually writing music for whoever's house he was in at the time. So he has lots of documented music, and it was very popular at the time. He was like the equivalent of a rock star at the time. One fact I found out that shows kind of how popular he was a few decades later, after he had died, there was the Belfast Harp Festival, and I think of all 12 harpers that came together to play, I think 10 played tunes written by him, but had never met him before. That's how influential he was. Wow. His music just took Ireland by storm. So I'll be playing some of his stuff, and I'll also be playing some of my own material because I just like to. It feels close to home, and it's something that I can offer and nobody else can. So. The O'Carolan tune I will be playing is called Clergy's Lamentation. I just recently learned it. One of my students came to a lesson and said, I want to learn this one, and I didn't know it. And so I said, okay, let's both learn it. And so I set a challenge. I would arrange it and she would arrange it. And so you'll hear my arrangement. And then I'll be playing a couple of my own tunes. The first one is a waltz that I wrote called Air and Sunshine.
I cannot wait. So thank you so much for sharing about your history, and thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, absolutely. It's been really fun.
Great. I know. Likewise.
Hi, my name's Neve O'Connor, and I'm here with two musicians. We have Celia Zhang and Rayleigh Beggs. Thanks for being on the show with us. Instead of me trying to rattle off your incredible histories, I'm just going to give you both a chance to give us some snapshots of what you've been up to. So, Celia, if you want to start.
Sounds great. So I was born in Iowa, but mostly grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. That's where I would say most of my musical training before college had taken place. Once I reached college, I went to the Juilliard School in New York City and received my master's at the Yale School of Music. And then I recently moved to Boston and started a teaching and performing career here.
That's amazing. Great.
Yeah,
Really?
so I grew up in Florida. I was fortunate enough to kind of land in a classical music community, specifically classical guitar down there, and very lucky to earn a scholarship to Florida State University. So I completed that. I got a bachelor's at Florida State for classical guitar performance, and then I moved up here for the purpose of going to New England Conservatory. So not as fortunate on the scholarship side, but very fortunate culturally to be here. And since I've been out since 2014, and same as Celia, I've been teaching and performing as much as I can, building a career out of that.
That's awesome. Wow, thank you so much. So I just have a couple questions for both of you. Or I'll start with individual questions. Celia, I noticed when reading up on your history and what you've accomplished that you were involved in a Music in Schools initiative.
Yes.
Can you speak more to that?
Yes, so when I was at Yale in New Haven, there was a program that was a joint program between the Yale School of Music, the graduate school, and the New Haven public school system. So what would happen was the graduate students at Yale would get to collaborate with the public school students in their music classes and work with the public school teachers and so on, and give music lessons, give sectionals, give coaching and advice for the musicians in the public schools. And they were all of all kinds of backgrounds, so it was a great way to share love of music and also gain teaching experience in the process.
That's amazing. That I really appreciate that too, because I remember when I was a freshman in high school, we had, hordes of art students down at City Hall, begging for funding for these programs, and I think it's just really important to have mentors and people that are equally passionate about the art that they do, influencing younger people.
Absolutely, it's
awesome.
very important nowadays, and so lucky to get to take part in that.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And you've also performed all over the world, right? Can you speak a little to that?
Well, a lot of my training included doing summer festivals, and to those, luckily for me, got to take place in all kinds of places. Some were Aspen, Colorado, Charleston, but also near Beijing in China, in South Korea, also a concert in Austria. It was just all over the place, and so it was a great excuse to travel.
Yeah, I can imagine. So Quincy's lucky to have you. So
Happy to be here.
great. And Rayleigh, when I was reading about you, I obviously came across your awesome videos, and I was thinking to myself, do you have a background in editing or videography, or do you do those videos yourself, or do you get help?
Yeah, all those are 100% me, and it's just a cell phone actually. So yeah, we all have kind of access to such great cameras, I think, at the moment. But I have zero training in that sort of thing. Those videos for me are I do so much classical music stuff. Sometimes personally I feel a little bit stifled by it, so I do. It's a great way for me to kind of get things off my chest, and it's a bit more of a snapshot of my life for me to look back on.
Yeah, they're really great, and they show kind of a more vulnerable side of you as an artist too, which is so great when we have such an overload of media these days. You know what I mean? It's great. Yeah. But also, I was just wondering if you ever write your own music, if you have any albums or anything in the works.
Yeah, I don't have any albums at all. Again, much more personally to me, I feel like the game of music has changed a lot since I started. So I used to put a lot of weight on albums, and I used to put a lot of weight on even copyright and kind of protecting stuff. And now, as I've kind of evolved, I care much more about just kind of getting things out and moving on, not really thinking so much
doing it just to do it, right? You know, like
Yeah.
for the love of it.
Yeah.
And so you sing as well. Was that something that, you know, you've always been doing, or was it your career in music that kind of brought that out in you?
Yeah, so I am, again, by no means trained as a singer or even a songwriter. It was much more for me to explore that kind of on my own after having been so deeply trained in classical guitar. I just sort of felt like exploring that sort of thing, and it feels to me very authentic to the experience I'm having. So just kind of an exploration, to be honest.
Yeah. It's probably kind of like cathartic and therapeutic as well. Yeah.
100%, 100%. And it's the thing I always tell people is it's kind of my deathbed soundtrack. It's like a way to, you know, look back on things, and you know, very frankly, I don't care if it does well or if anybody listens to it. It's honestly for me.
How does your experience in performing kind of manifest itself in your teaching? And, you know, what do you want to bestow onto your students now that you're at EKS, both of you? Oh, if maybe one of you want to talk a bit about the program that you're both a part of at EKS.
Sure.
Celia?
So EKS is a studio here in Quincy. Actually, it's just down the road. It's on Standish Avenue. And it's a high-quality music school, so it's very focused on classical instrumentalists, and we have piano, violin, woodwinds, singing, guitar. Someone's going to kill me for leaving something out, but we have all the instruments that are in a classical music setting, and then some. So it's much more focused on like a real mastery of an instrument at a young age. So it's a great place to be a part of. I've been there since it started, so I started the guitar program there, and really, really have a great group of kids, like really excellent studio there for me. And we've actually paired up with what's called the Royal Conservatory of Music. So we have our students, the ones we feel are ready for it, and the ones who are ready to take that challenge on. They can register for the assessment program. So there's a whole hierarchy of levels for students to kind of progress through and be tested and graded on. So it kind of raises the stakes of their performance. So big pairing there, but it's no joke. It's a high quality program right here.
Sounds like serious objectives for, you know, young people that are trying to practice their skills, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So Celia, what do you teach down at the school?
I teach violin. It's unfortunately the only instrument I can play, but it's something that I absolutely love to do. Personally, over my career, since I started 20 years ago playing, I feel like I've gone through a huge journey in terms of experiencing things, taking things in, and I feel like while teaching that to other students, it's incredibly important to be able to empathize with the joys, but also the struggles of learning to play an instrument. And so those are things that I really like to highlight in my lessons and emphasize that I understand where things are coming from, I understand what the struggles are, and I'm here to help. So
yeah, do you ever have
really
moments of like seeing younger parts of yourselves in these kids?
Too often.
Oh man,
it freaks me out.
It's not easy,
amazing.
right? You know, like someone tried to teach me how to read music once, and I was like, not happening. You know, it's a different language. You know,
It really, really is.
So wow, that's amazing. Do you have any like favorite memories from the school so far, or you know, any funny stories to share? You know?
I would say there was one student a couple of weeks ago who was having she just started this new technique called double stops, where you play two at the same time, and the concept sounds extremely fancy, but in terms of the execution, it's really like a matter of logic in a way. So when she approached during the first lesson, she was freaking out. She was just like, I can't do this. This is too complicated, and all these things. And the next week, she had it nailed perfectly, and it was just one of those like perfect like eureka moments that you could see like when it hit her at the end of the first lesson, and then as she incorporated it into the next lesson, it was just so amazing. So.
That sounds so cool. Like it must
so
be
rewarding.
such a
Yeah.
rewarding and such a confidence boost. Like I bet you both are learning so much about your own skills, as like honing your
for
skills
sure.
as well as helping others.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So we're actually going to hear a piece from both of you today, right?
Yes.
And what's that called? Do you want to?
So this is by a guy named Niccolo Paganini. He's a real big figure in violin music. A less known fact is that he was also a guitar player. So he wrote quite a bit of duo music. So guitar accompanying violin, and this is one of them. This is called Cantabile. So it's a slower, kind of lyrical show-off piece for Celia.
Has some diva moments.
You deserve it for sure. Thank you so much for coming in to speak with us. Can't wait to hear your piece. And I wish you luck at the school and for all of your very lucky students.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.